Good evening. Friends, I have a new way of evaluating language learning, a new paradigm. Traditionally, language learning is evaluated based on your proficiency of learning the words and the sounds and how well you can do conversations and how well you can talk and write and communicate. It would seem like that would be basic. There would be no other way to evaluate it. People's goal is usually fluency. You hear that again and again. I want to be fluent. I want to be fluent. And when they do that, what they're aiming to do is master the language. People often have timetables for that. They say if you spend this many amounts of hours studying a language, you're going to be fluent in it. This has not worked for me. People ask me what level I'm at in the language I'm studying. I'm studying two languages right now. We'll call one language A and the other one language B. Language A, I started studying about 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 to 6 years ago, somewhere around there. I started slowly, and then I gradually moved up. I have tried a number of ways of learning this language. For example, I used this website. They had modules for learning. They got PDFs, and they have audio versions of it. You can listen to it. They got videos. I found that process fulfilling. It was a good experience, and it helped me learn. So I worked on that way for a while. And then, at the beginning of 2024, I hired a tutor for language A. And that seemed to help me more. When you learn by yourself and you're not proficient in the language, you're going to not always know whether you're right or not. So the guidance is helpful. Also, they can help you practice your conversation, and they often say it's in a safe environment. So if you make a mistake in the real world, it can be embarrassing, yet it's a laboratory for learning. So this seemed to work well. So I did a few years on my own with the language A, and then I got a tutor. Other than, of course, the website that I paid for. So the tutor was one of the best things I ever bought with money. She was from a country that is very intellectually sophisticated, very technologically sophisticated, yet they have low income. So she was able to, the little I was giving her was benefiting her life. So that was great. So this worked well for 2024, and then towards the end of 2024, she started to get more involved in the university. Therefore, she wasn't able to devote as much time, and she had to cancel a lot of lessons. So I don't have a tutor so much with that. I do have another way of learning part of it, and that's through a religious assembly. And that's one of the struggles with language learning is when you're on your own and you're not in a country where that language is spoken often, it's hard to get practice, hard to do it. And I found no matter how much you do it on your own, it's not going to be enough. It's not like it doing it in real life with people. So this is specialized religious language learning. So this one is free. The religious assembly offers it free, so it's valuable. At this religious assembly, one time there was an individual who didn't speak English, and he only spoke language A. Therefore, I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. Unfortunately, I saw a lot of gaps. Now, this language A has a formal version, a standard version, and also it's spoken widely, so there's a lot of dialects, they say. Therefore, the spoken. I did some of both because what I was studying on that website before I got my tutor was the dialect version of the area I want to go. Therefore, when I was talking to this individual, there are some words I could say, there's some words I couldn't say. So what does that mean? You can say half the words, but you can't say half. So if you can say half the words, are you a beginner? If you can't make a sentence, are you a beginner? People ask me, are you a beginner? Are you intermediate? It depends how you classify this stuff. So at the beginning of 2025, I got a tutor for language B. And language B, I've been studying for maybe since 2021, somewhere around there. 2022. So that's been a few years, so like 3 years. And where do I stand with that? Now, right now I have the tutor, and we have regular contacts. And this language is also not spoken very widely. What's my routine? I do this every day. I make sure I do something every day. Language experts say you want to speak, write, read, and hear every day. And that's what I aim for. When I go jogging, when I do distance ultra running, I devote a lot of that, in fact, the vast majority of that time to reciting language learning. Yet I have very little dialogue with other individuals for language A or language B. So if I can't put together a sentence, and I've been studying for, let's take that back. I can put together some sentences, yet not all sentences. And one thing I found out is useful in language learning is to study something you love. I love religious things and political things. I love theology and politics, especially radical versions of such. Alternative party politics. I love heresies and free thought things. So those are the words that I'm using the most. If the regular words don't come up very much in conversation, these words are not. Yet, I might know more in these subject areas than native speakers would know. I don't know how to converse in everyday talk more than native speakers. When it comes to heresies, I've tons and tons of heresies I've translated into language A. And I'm working on it to do it as language B too. So I memorized in language A all these heresies. Most native speakers, if you ask them, how do you say semi-Pelagianism, or I don't know how to say that in English, so yet I can probably say it better in the native, in that language A, than in English. So how do you say that in your language? They probably wouldn't know. Yeah, I know. So am I a beginner, advanced, intermediate? Therefore, friends, I propose a new paradigm for language learning. And I have this diagram I was making earlier, and I'm going to refer to that as I continue with this talk here. So the questions I've been asking is, if you can say some sentences but not others, if you can say half the words you want to say, yet not half the words, does that mean you're an absolute beginner? Or does that mean you're intermediate? People often do it in a very ABC type of way, black or white thing. Certain levels, you have to pass a test, and they refer to these various tests. So I propose these are other criteria. How often do you do it each day? Do you have a passion for it? How well do you use it every day? One thing I found out in using multiple languages, it's helpful to assign each language to a task. For language A, I'm assigning that to things related to my small business. And I assigned it to other things too. That was my main language for a while. So language B, I've been assigning to my freelance work. I do a small business and freelance work. How long have you been studying? If you've been studying language for 5 years, I've been studying this more than 5 years. Like I mentioned, it was starting 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. Slowly at first, sure. And then 2020, when I got enrolled in that online curriculum, then it accelerated. So if I've been doing it this long, yet I can't make a lot of sentences, I get nervous too when I speak because I don't speak very much. So does that mean I'm a beginner? If you've done it 6 years, how can you be a beginner? Yet, I may not have be as conversationally proficient as people would like me to be at this time. Frequency of practice, consistency of practice is one key. How well it's integrated in your life. One thing I've learned is I study shadow psychology, and they say you want to do the opposite of what you're doing, because if you're doing too much one way, you're holding yourself back. And one thing, I hope this is not arrogant, is I put a lot of effort into things I believe, and sometimes I do too much, and then I don't have enough rest. So one thing I've been doing is, like, religions have Sabbaths and vacations and sabbaticals, all that stuff. So therefore, I did that with my language learning. I was running into a wall, and I wasn't getting any further despite doing it day after day after day. So I had this insight that I was doing a lot of vocabulary. So what I needed to do was immerse myself in it and integrate it into my life. So that's what I was talking earlier about assigning a task, and therefore I'm constantly, as I go, instead of saying something in English, I'm wanting to say it in this language, language A. I mentioned earlier specialized vocabulary. If you have a lot of specialized vocabulary, that may mean you're more advanced than native speakers. Yet, ironically, you have less of the basic stuff. You may not know, I forget how to say hat in language A. Yet, like I said, I can say all these heresies, these heresies, and these theological terms, and also political terms too. So friends, if we put all these things together, I think we have a new criteria here. You could assign it points. Length of study, how well integrated in life, consistency of practice, how long you've been doing it, your passion. Also, part of it with what there traditionally is how well you can converse and express yourself and communicate and understand the language. That is key too. How well you assign it to tasks, length of study. So friends, let's consider this. And this is a new paradigm for language learning. This is how I evaluate myself. So if they're going to ask me, am I advanced, intermediate, or beginner, on their traditional criteria, probably I'm going to be a beginner. Yet it wouldn't make any sense, given all this stuff. And also, sometimes people say you can't, it's not about work. It's not about trying hard. It has to be results. I don't want that to be that way. John Piper said, faithfulness is more valuable than fruitfulness. And some believe ultimately you'll be judged in this life based on how well you do, because not everyone is going to has the same talent. So if I am less talented language-wise than somebody else, and I put in more effort, then maybe I'll get more rewards. So my goal is fluency, yet it's eluding me. Despite all this effort, day after day, I've missed, besides the days, like I mentioned, I took off for the rest periods. There were a couple times, maybe 3 times I did that for 4 days out of a year. And maybe 1 time or 2 times I forgot to do any studying of it in several years. So therefore, I've put in as much effort as you can. I do it, like I said, I'm doing hours a day by myself. Unfortunately, there's not that many speakers here. So friends, I would like to think I'm advanced, given all this time. Yet some people are going to say I'm not, because the traditional criteria is going to say I'm not advanced. Maybe if I'm lucky, there might be some tests I could do and get slightly in the intermediate level. I fear that wouldn't happen. So friends, let's reconsider languages. Let's reconsider how we evaluate languages. And then we can say that, because I feel like this is my own. I feel like this is a part of me. So if it's a part of me, how can it be a beginner? How can it be a beginner? Also, before we go, there's this YouTube channel called Maya Polyglot, and she says another criteria is when you get advanced in language, you have a different personality. She speaks 9 languages, so she says as a personality, every language that she's advanced in. So I believe that's another way we can evaluate. So we can add these criteria on, and then it's not one thing. So I would maybe lose points for how much level of knowledge able to communicate myself. Like I said, I messed up that one time, and one time I got worse because I called the guy a woman when I wanted to speak in the language. He wanted me to speak English, even though he couldn't speak English, and we could use a translator, but I wanted to because you get so few chances to do it. Then afterwards I told my tutor, who was then we were more regular then, she was saying that it's okay, yet we want to get you to the point where you feel comfortable. So that is the goal. And friends, let's evaluate language learning differently. And it may be more complicated this way. Some people might not like that. The other way is very simple. This way is more complicated. Like I've said before, Aspies throw people off because they want to put them in these boxes and it doesn't work out. So friends, let's reconsider language learning.